Welcome to episode 12 of Ship of the Week. This week we're discussing the U.S. Navy ironclad gunboat USS Cairo. Cairo will not be the last ship we cover from this period, but in order to understand why her existence was necessary, we must begin on November 6, 1860, and Abraham Lincoln's election to the presidency of the United States. For decades, conflicting interests between the northern and southern portions of the young republic steadily approached a boiling point. Contrary to what many then and now want desperately to believe, these tensions centered primarily around the institution of slavery. Lincoln's high-profile disdain for slavery triggered a near immediate secession by South Carolina following his victory, and thereafter, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Texas did the same, establishing a provisional government under the name the Confederate States of America. By the time Lincoln was inaugurated on the eastern steps of the U.S. Capitol on March 4, 1861, both nations were preparing for war. War came in April, when the U.S. Army refused to depart Fort Sumter, an installation in Charleston Harbor, and was fired upon by rebel militia. The fort was surrendered to Confederate authorities without casualty, but the engagement effectively began hostilities. The South was, prior to the start of the war, primarily agricultural economically. It needed to build much of the industry necessary to wage war from scratch. The deep interior of the American continent was for hundreds of years supplied to a large degree via the two great rivers, the Missouri and the Mississippi, and both governments realized that victory in the Western theater required control of the river trade routes. The famous American engineer and prolific inventor James Eads was contracted by the U.S. Army to design and build a class of ironclad warships, the first of their type, operated by the United States. The 7 vessels became the City-class gunboats. Laid down at the Mound City, Illinois Naval Station, the hull that became USS Cairo was 175 feet in length and registered a little over 500 tons. She was named for the city of Cairo, Illinois, where General Grant's temporary headquarters were set up in the local post office. Cairo was armed with 3 8-inch Dahlgren guns, similar to this slightly larger weapon pictured aboard USS Kearsarge, and an assortment of smaller guns that rotated somewhat throughout the ship's short career depending on what the War Department had at its disposal. Entering service for the Army's Western Gunboat Flotilla in January of 1862, a unit under Lieutenant James Pritchett. And during this period, Cairo supported operations against Nashville that led to its fall to federal forces, and in April she steamed south, arriving in early May near Plum Point, where the federal flotilla was caught off guard by Confederate ships in the early morning of May 10th. Cairo did little to actively engage Confederate forces at Plum Point, although she was part of an effort to prevent her sister USS Mound City from sinking, which proved unsuccessful. Over the next few weeks, Cairo participated in the bombardment and blockade of Fort Pillow, which surrendered on June 4th. And days later, Cairo was present for the Battle of Memphis, in which 8 U.S. ships resoundingly defeated 8 Confederate vessels, of which 5 were run aground and destroyed. Memphis fell to federal forces. Later that year, Cairo was transferred from the Army to the Navy, and Thomas Selfridge was given command of the ship. She was to participate in Grant's Vicksburg campaign and was conducting minesweeping operations in preparation to that end when she struck a remote detonation mine and sank rapidly. Her crew managed to escape the dying ship. Lost beneath the shifting silt of the Mississippi, her wreck was identified in 1956 by the National Park Service, which immediately set about recovering artifacts from the wreck. The state of Mississippi allocated funds for the salvage operation, and the ship, partially reassembled, sits on the grounds of Vicksburg National Military Park to this day, where her shattered timbers, armor, guns, and artifacts are available for public viewing.